Hi everyone, Eric Chappelle, Civil Community Evangelist for Autodesk, and I want to welcome you all to today's webcast. This one is Ask Dave about Civil 3D, and we're going to do something completely different today. In a moment, you're going to have a live camera feed at our Manchester office, and it won't just be Dave, but he's got some of his team with him as well that he'll introduce to you when the time comes. Before we get to that, and I'm going to hurry through the slides that I typically do because I know everyone's anxious to see what Dave's going to have to talk about. I just want to welcome everyone to our webcast series. If you're new to the series, we've been doing this twice a month for, in April, it'll be 2 straight years. So we've been doing this for a while. We've got a good, solid following of attendees, so it's been a real successful program. The idea is to provide an opportunity where the folks that make the software that you use can talk to you and answer some of your questions and give you some ideas of what's on their mind. And today couldn't be a better example of that because we've gathered up a bunch of questions for Dave and his team, and he's going to be giving you those answers. So you'll get to hear what's on his mind as well as the mind of some of his team members. Speaking of the series, what's coming up next on Wednesday, February 15th, 2 weeks from today, same time slot, 12 to 1 Eastern. Jeff Bartles is going to be back, and he's going to be talking about creating custom InfraWorks 360 content. And if you follow the Civil Immersion blog, he's been doing some cool stuff with the good old chicken and waffles restaurant that we've all come to know and love. And he's going to be showing you some more detail on how he develops some of that custom content. So a way to learn how to build that library in InfraWorks 360 to be even more than it currently offers. I've got a few polls, so while I've got an audience here with me, it's a good opportunity to get some feedback. So I'm going to launch the first poll, which is, what's your current usage level with InfraWorks 360? So let us know where you're at with your InfraWorks 360 usage. If you're a regular on the webcast, this is one that we've been asking, I think, since the very beginning. So it's been interesting to watch the progression. I think when we first started, it was very heavy on the first answer or two, from don't even have it installed to I've installed it and messed with it a few times, and now we're seeing a really strong showing, and today is no exception. In the I regularly use it on some projects. So I'm going to close that poll down. Thanks to everyone who answered. We got 78% response on that. The next one is, we want to know what you're using InfraWorks 360 for. And you can choose multiple answers here. Choices are site design, road design, GIS data compilation for early project planning, residential, and visualizing projects. So let us know what you use it for the most if you use it. And right now, the last answer, visualizing projects, is getting the largest number of votes, 71% right now. 53% road design, 38% GIS data, 18% residential, and 35% site design. So visualizing projects is the clear winner there, but road design's not far behind. All right, thanks to everyone who voted in that poll. And then I've got a new one, another one about InfraWorks 360. From the answers to the previous polls, we know that some of you are using it, but if there isn't full adoption in your company, meaning every Civil 3D user is using InfraWorks 360 also, if that isn't the case, tell us why. We want to know what your obstacle is in the way of full InfraWorks 360 adoption. Is it the cost of the software? Is it the lack in product functionality? Is it a lack of clarity about how it fits in with your company? Is it the fact that Civil 3D does what you need it to do, and there's no reason to add on InfraWorks? And then finally, is it training and implementation costs? If you don't see the item up there that is the reason, please type it in the questions panel in GoToWebinar. I wanted to add an other to this, but the GoToWebinar interface only gives me 5 options for a multiple choice. So if there's one up there that you're not seeing, please type it in and let us know what that obstacle is. So I'm not sure if you guys can see the results, but the winner is unclear how to incorporate InfraWorks into our workflows. That's 35% of the answer. 28%, 30% now is that Civil 3D already does what we need 18, lacking product functionality, 9, cost of software, and 6% training and implementation costs. So appreciate everyone who provided an answer for that. That information is very helpful to us. I'm going to go ahead and close down that poll. Just want to let you guys know about our community and our community site. We've got a hub. It's under autodesk.com/InfraWorks360 community. And there you'll see ways to link out to the forum, Idea Station, Infra Tips, all the things you see listed there on your screen. There are lots of amazing community resources out there, many of which are interacted with by your peers, other folks using the software that you're using, as well as Autodesk folks, some of them on this call today, on this webcast. This product team is amazing about getting involved in the forums and Idea Station and directly answering questions and providing insights. So take advantage of that. Get out there and interact with other folks who are using the software and also with the folks making it. Get some more insight into what's going on. If by chance we talk about something that is down the road but not implemented yet, that's why I have to throw this slide up there. Anything about preview features or labs features or roadmap, things coming up in the software, we just want to make sure you understand that basically if you don't see it in the software yet, there's no guarantee that it's ever going to be there. So don't make any purchasing decisions based on any discussion of upcoming features or something that we're working on. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave and also some other members of his team who he is going to introduce you to. So Dave, I'm going to switch presenter over to you. And you now have the floor.
Cool. Hey, Eric. Thank you very much for inviting us to join for today. Again, my name is Dave Simeone, Senior Product Manager for Civil 3D. We're here in lovely Manchester, New Hampshire. Actually, I wish I should have driven my webcam around the office. It's this beautiful old mill building, but you get a kind of a feel for it behind me here. Yeah, so Eric asked, first of all, kind of the way we looked at this webcast, and we said, let's kind of make it as interactive as possible. Let's give you an opportunity to basically ask us on the product team questions about things that we're working on, kind of what's going on our side, that are influencing, the near and longer term roadmap, kind of how civil fits into the larger infrastructure ecosystem. So rather than just us having just a kind of a scripted presentation, what we thought we'd do is we'd give you the opportunity to post questions, and then we would do our best to answer as many as possible in the hour that we have. To that note, I printed out kind of the list. So kind of got the list of questions right here. You can kind of see them as I move back out. So, the point is there's a lot of questions that came in, which is great. I mean, we got, there's a ton of information that you are, looking for, and obviously we're not going to be able to get through all of this. So we'll do our best. What we've done is some of these things we've kind of put into themes and buckets. So we'll do our best to kind of hit upon those, along the way. We've got a couple of folks in the room here who are going to help out, actually. So to my right, we've got Peter Funk. Peter, product manager for Civil for many, many years, focusing kind of across the board on products, certainly on transportation, but really touching the whole product. One of his focus areas and one of the things I'm going to have him talk about today is what we've got going on our cloud strategy. So Peter's here. He'll be answering some questions. We've got Tim Yaris. Tim leads our product design efforts for Civil 3D. So anyone who's been involved with any of our validation work, our weekly webcasts, our futures program has likely interacted with Tim, but certainly you as a Civil 3D user, any of the features that you're touching, any of those workflows that you're leveraging, Tim's had a significant impact on, I guess for better or worse, Tim? No, for better. Anyway, for all good, yeah. So Tim will also be here answering questions, and then we got Elliot Rosenfeld. Hopefully I've got that spun all the way around. Elliot, as Eric introduced, is involved with across the infrastructure side, but a little bit more of a focus on InfoWorks, about learning and training and really driving adoption of our infrastructure products across the board. Elliot transferred from California out to New Hampshire here, so he's still kind of figuring out this whole cold thing. But he's getting a handle on it. He's getting a handle on it. He's still questioning if he can get a wetsuit thick enough to let him surf out here, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, so we'll do our best as we go through to answer questions. So feel free to post questions right into the go-to interface. So with that, what I wanted to do, let me go back to my list here. The thing that I thought I kind of speak to a little bit is that there was a whole theme of questions related to, I think just in general, what's our development focus from a Civil 3D standpoint? A lot of the questions that we got really get into, are we focusing on this? Are we investing in this? Are we going to develop that? And I think before we talk about those things that we are working on or those things that we've recently delivered, I thought it would be really important just to understand just how we're allocating resources and how we're investing in Civil. We're not reinventing Civil 3D, right? Civil 3D initial, it's debatable whether the 2014 or 2015 release you could categorize as the first, production release of Civil 3D. But we've been building on this framework that we introduced, more than 10 years ago, and the first, let's say, 10 or so years was all about building that out. Right? It was adding those core features that we needed in the product, so points and tray modeling, a quarter, and so on. What you've seen in the last couple of years, last few releases, has been less about introducing those major buckets of functionality. It's been much more about how do we make it so that those things that are in the product are more efficient, faster, easier for people, easier to use. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is a little less expert mode, right? Sometimes there are things that just, can be simplified. The thing we always talk about, and I apologize because I always repeat this, is, one of our goals is to take what would have been a 45 or 90-minute Autodesk University class and turn it into a simple operation. The intersection command is probably a good example of what could have been or what historically was many, many, many steps, and we're turning it into something that, we turn that into really a simple process. So how do we make kind of those common operations as well as those things that maybe are less common, but really they shouldn't be as difficult as they are. So again, it's about efficiency, it's about performance, things like scalability fit into that as well. I think ease of use and less expert mode. And then I'd say the big area that we're also driving towards is just in general this whole concept of BIM modeling and BIM intelligence, right? We've introduced some things in the past year or so that really are about adding intelligence into the model. We're leveraging this technology called property sets, which really lets us put all of that additional object information into the model in a very efficient way. And as we build that further and further out, now you'll start to see we're introducing tools that let you add that information into labels, and then include that information as you move it into other environments, so that it's not just locked into Civil 3D. Or on the other side, maybe it's we're starting to think about how we include that in things like QTO and material totals and reports and so on. So those are kind of the things that we're at a high level, I guess at a macro level, looking at. So again, it's not, we're investing heavily in Civil 3D. We've got fantastic teams who are working on working on it. And again, it's in those areas. So simplicity, efficiency, ease of use, scalability, and then building out the model intelligence. Okay, so that's kind of, if I look through that big list of things, there were a number of things that kind of fit into that bucket. So I just want to kind of hit that as kind of as a high level. So a couple things that that came through here, and one of them that has come up, and I'm gonna speak to it. I'm not going to do any kind of a demo, but this has come up with the release of 2017, and it's something that we have seen over the years throughout the life of Civil 3D. And it's about backward compatibility, and really about this whole idea of us introducing a new object version as we come into new releases. So for those of you who have been around for a long time, in the early days, each release, each version of Civil 3D, so we went from 14 to 15, 15 to 16, 16 to 17, we would promote the object model to the new version. Essentially, and I'm not a programmer, but think of it this way: it's like we're introducing new capabilities into that object model. So we're making it so maybe there's a new display component to it. Maybe there's some new behavior that didn't exist in the past. There's just a number of capabilities that we add into the object model per release. If you think about when you add that new functionality in a release, the prior version of that release wasn't aware of that, or didn't understand, or didn't know how to interact or deal with that new capability. So the way we've dealt with that, so that there weren't catastrophic issues or unexpected errors or some kind of significant issues that could arise, what we've done is we've made it so that when you go from when we have one of these object version changes, we make it so that that object is no longer, you can't interact with the object model, you can't edit, author in those prior versions. So you can still see the drawing, right? You can still see those objects. You need to have proxy graphics turned on. So you still have the drawing, and it's not destructive to those objects. Everything is there. What we do, though, is we disable Civil 3D from allowing you to interact and possibly disrupt those objects. So it's a fairly, we understand the ramifications of organizations as you look at going from, say, a prior version up to a new version. That's something that has to be factored in, and we do our best to build and make sure people are aware of that information. I don't know if we'll ever be able to do enough of that information, kind of communicating all of that out, but it's not something that we do lightly. It's something that we have seen, when you go from into release Civil 3D 2017, right? So we're able to, what we had changed for the 13 release, and this kind of tricked people a little bit, is we were able to stabilize that object version. So from 13, 14, 15, and 16, we were essentially able to lock down the object version. So you didn't have that. However, when we got to release 17, 2017, there were a number of improvements that we needed to make that required us to change the object format. So that raised that object format change. So that's just a little background on why we do that. Again, it's not that we decide that we understand the impact, and we try to lock it down as long as we possibly can, and then we get to a point where it's like, okay, let's try to get all of those object changes into one platform. So with 17, the things such as being able to have a deref of the quarter, being able to use a feature line as a baseline for a quarter, a number of other things that we added in 17 were enabled because we had this object version change, and then that gives that ability to leverage those tools for subsequent releases. So again, just wanted to hit that one, kind of give you a little bit of a background on why that is, and again, just it is a really important thing as you make decisions on which version of Civil 3D you're going to roll out, and if you are, those are some of the factors that you're going to have to work through. Okay, so I think I've yapped on quite a bit. So what I think would be interesting is there's a couple of questions here. Actually, Tim, I think I'm going to come over to you. So we have a few different questions that were asked about specific functionality capabilities inside of Civil 3D. So Tim, I'm going to pass this over to you. I'll put the webcam on you if you want to share. The first one that was asked was about the ability to create plan-over-plan sheets versus just, plan-over profile. So if that's something you're able to cover.
So long-standing request for plan-over-plan sheets in our plan production tools. So this is something that's going to be coming in an upcoming release of Civil 3D. I'll just show you how this is going to work. So create view frames. We didn't really want to do anything in the way of disrupting the just the existing workflows that people have in place and everything. So the way that we're going to accomplish this is that just same kind of situation as when you're creating view frames today. When you pick your template, you've always been able to do either plan and profile or plans only or profiles. We've now set it up so in your templates you can set up your plan production templates to use multiple plan or multiple profile viewports in there. And I'll show you just how that works and everything. But basically, I already set this drawing up so that I already created my plan over plan sheets. And so you see here that once you've got those, you've gone through that process and everything, you just get your plan over plan sheets. And basically the way that works is that for each of the viewports, we added this new viewport order property that basically lets you say which order, as it implies, you want your changes to be represented on your template. So if this is 1, this is 2, it goes from the top down. And we're not limiting you to just two viewports and everything. So as many as you can put into your template, then you can make those sheets with using as many templates as you want. Make sense?
One thing I'll say, Tim, and that's good, perfect. One thing Tim said is something we're working on in a release. We have no clue when this will ship.
Yeah.
So really, this is,
theoretically speaking,
this is theoretically, hypothetically something that we're working on. The point here is, yes, this is something that is certainly in our product roadmap. Some things we can show you a little bit more deeply than others. So Tim, along a similar vein, there's another request which was related to being able to launch InfoWorks from directly within Civil 3D.
Right. So with that, again, this points back to Eric's earlier slide regarding the disclaimer on everything. So let's just say, for example, that we had an Autodesk InfoWorks ribbon tab that we would then kind of go and just kind of consolidate all of our existing InfoWorks-related tools. So things such as just immediately launching InfoWorks just directly from Civil 3D, and then pretty much a lot of the other existing tools that we have that are related to InfoWorks. So things such as like your exchange settings, like that kind of thing, just opening a model directly and all that kind of thing. So just stuff that you can do in InfoWorks from Civil 3D that might be a bit kind of spread around right now. We're looking into consolidating into a single place to make it easier to use InfoWorks and Civil 3D together.
Yeah, and along those lines, this is the first step towards trying to provide more interactive kind of dual product workflows. We are very aware that there's a number of additional workflows that we can and should and will target. So, and they were listed out in a lot of the sheet here. So, I know people are asking about, being able to move just elements back and forth between the products. We saw it, with Bridge. We see it with Corridor. We see it with just general design objects. Point clouds. We'll talk about point clouds in a couple of minutes. So this is a step towards that. First step is to get this kind of tied into the product in a nice, clean way, and then what we envision is this kind of filling out with more purpose-built workflows. So as you think about those workflows, let us know. Peter will talk a little bit about some different ways that we can, you can contribute ideas or suggestions on best, the most important workflows to define and help us prioritize those. So Tim, the last one that I wanted you to hit, if you could, related to site. There was a number of questions on the site side, and as I said, there's a lot of work that we've been doing kind of on refining and tuning Civil 3D. So one of the areas that we looked at from a site standpoint was, again, further expanding our capabilities with feature lines. And we looked at how a lot of people work with feature lines today using this idea of a reference surface and basically projecting elements up onto that. Actually, Tim, was I gonna let me
You want to touch that?
Yeah, let me touch this real quick, and then maybe we'll come back over to you, Tim, because I want to actually show people that I know how to run the product still. Okay, so in this example right here, so you have I have these 3 feature lines right here. These 3 feature lines are being used to build a reference surface. Basically, that reference surface, what I'm doing is I'm draping these feature lines up onto that reference surface. It's kind of the way we've heard people work and have worked since we've introduced feature lines. What we're looking at is this whole idea of allowing that feature line to remain relative or basically vertically glued to that surface. So in this case, you can see my parking island outline is going to remain relative to this surface. In this case, that surface is named reference. Right, so that's basically my flow surface. So now any changes to my flow surface are going to be impacted here. And the other thing as we looked at it was maybe it doesn't drape perfectly on the surface. Maybe throughout the entire feature line or pieces in the feature line, I want that to be some relative value above or below that. The other thing is I may have some parts of this where I actually want it to be at an absolute elevation instead of a relative elevation. So as we looked at this kind of approach, like in this case right here, this, my top of curb, you'll see that this is also relative to my reference surface, but it's half a foot above it. Okay, and the result I get, you can see in 3D, I've got my surface that's been created just from those feature lines. This is a very, very simple case, obviously. But you'll see if I make changes to, so for instance, if I make a change, say to this, I'm going to make something fairly obvious here. Let me move this up 10 feet. Right, you'll see that now that whole surface is bent and all those feature lines have moved up, and then the surface that's derived from those feature lines is all adjusted on the fly. So that's kind of this whole idea that we're looking at is how do we start to build out some of those kind of the ribs that are going to be used in the modeling. Okay, and Tim, now if you could show this in another context, that would be really, really cool. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Sure. I'll make myself presenter. Okay, great. So this is another example of something that Dave was just showing here. So you can imagine, like, if you hit mute, please, real quick. That's my head. Thank you. Anyway, so one of the things we rolled out in 2017 was the ability to use a feature line as a quarter baseline. So this is an example of just kind of building on what Dave was just showing and also building on that feature line as a baseline capability. So this is a case where, like in this viewport I've got set up here, you can see I've got like a really simple building pad and everything, and it's graded down and grading a surface and everything. I've got this retaining wall here that is built along this feature line. The feature line is relative to the surface that's being created from the grading. So if you think about it, if I were to do something like this where I would then like make a change to the grading, like for example, maybe if I like bumped up the surface to like or bumped up the feature line that's driving the grading, you see then that other feature line that's relative to the surface then moves up. My retaining wall then gets taller because the feature line got higher. My footing on the feature line on the retaining wall also got larger to accommodate the taller retaining wall and all that kind of stuff. So it's just another really interesting way to kind of use some of these tools together, just all in one big workflow, and everything kind of stays stuck together. So sound good, Dave?
Perfect, Tim. Thank you. One of the things, and there was a number of questions in the list, and Peter said there's been a few people who are posting it, is basically we need more BIM objects for things such as parking, pavement, and so on. So it is we're going to focus on, right now, I mean, a lot of the focus is on those ribs, right? Think of it, think of like an airplane, right? We're building out all those ribs that are used to then, kind of control a surface. We then are, starting to think about, okay, we know that you don't necessarily build, a parking lot, pavement, that isn't a surface, those are materials. So we are thinking about how, similar to we do on the corridor side, how we build in some of those kind of approaches on the corridor side that we do for parking. So, all right, Tim, you can stop sharing your screen for 1 second. Hey, we have a special guest here. You might be on mute. Try that. Do I sit next to you, Dave? Come on in. Okay. For those who have not yet met Dan Philbrick just happened to be walking by. So Dan just happened to be walking by, and Dan is the director for the infrastructure team, so based here in Manchester, New Hampshire. So focusing, Dan's able to bring kind of a, drive really what we're working on both with Civil 3D and InfraWorks, and also other things that pertain to infrastructure. So as Dan, we thought with Dan being able to join us for a couple minutes, we'd actually ask him a couple of questions. So what I looked at, again, from the list is I thought there were two kind of theme areas that would be good for you to talk about, Dan. First would be lots of questions on, Civil 3D, InfraWorks, kind of what's the strategy, I guess, between those two? How are we looking at those as fit in the market? Where do you see investment? Where do you see, near and long term, how these things really fit together into the world?
All right, thanks, Dave. Great question. So, before we get into that, though, I don't know if everyone knows on the call that we used to do the was it the Dave and Dan show or Dan and Dave show? I'm not sure which one it was, but
no, it was the Dave and Dan show.
Dave and Dan show, yeah. So several years ago, when Civil 3D was a little earlier on, we would do webcasts weekly or maybe bi-weekly, and one of the things that was fun on our end was coming up with the topics and working through this, and sometimes it was a bit of a last minute when we would get this content pulled together. And so I saw Dave walk by my office today, and I had seen social media. I'd seen Dave's face all over stuff this week, and I was like, wow, what's going on here? And so he walked by my office around 11:15, getting his computer ready, and I was like, so Dave, is it starting, is it starting now? And he's like, no, it's noon. And he's like, I'm testing out all the equipment and making sure everything works. And I was like, wow, so things have really changed with the Dave show. So congratulations, Dave. So, but anyway, thanks for having me join, Dave. So it's a great question. So I think to answer the question, we need to look a little bit at our overall strategy in terms of what we're doing. And as a company, we're really focusing on enabling what we call BIM for infrastructure as a strategy. And you may hear that and think, okay, BIM, what does that mean? I hear BIM a lot in architecture, so what does it mean for civil? And the concepts are completely aligned when we start to look at civil infrastructure. And it's really a process change. It's really a change in process, and we want to be leading that process, and we are leading that process. So one of the key things with this is InfraWorks, part of our strategy. And when we look at InfraWorks, part of BIM for infrastructure is being able to design infrastructure, being able to come up with concepts and design, early decisions in the process, and incorporate what we call analytics into that design process. So for example, I want to just do a design. I want to be able to look at that in context in 3D. I want to be able to start doing design, and I want to look at design alternatives, and I want to be able to have analytics. So if I'm designing a bridge, I want to be able to design that bridge and know structural characteristics. If I'm doing drainage, I want to be able to look at sizing the pipes right in context. I might want to do a flood simulation. We're working with a partner specifically around that. If I'm doing a highway, maybe I want to incorporate traffic analytics into that process. So incorporating all of these analytics in the design process, so you're getting the best design possible for your constraints. Secondly, building in really strong workflows to Civil 3D. So Civil 3D is the best product in the world for doing detailed design and production work. So I am continually excited about working with customers and seeing what they're doing when transportation and land development and water resource management, whatever it is, just doing really, really great work with Civil 3D. So Civil 3D is not going away. InfraWorks doesn't replace it. We just expect that InfraWorks will complement Civil 3D in that process. So you're working in InfraWorks, rapid conceptualization, design and engineering, moving to Civil 3D at the right time for detailed design and production. But also in this workflow is Revit. We're hearing more and more, and I'm sure individuals on this call, needing to really, it's not only Civil 3D, it's also with Revit. So being able to move information from InfraWorks into Revit and back and forth as well. So having a flow of information from InfraWorks to our detailed design applications is absolutely critical. And then lastly, I would say another part of this is having the information at the center. So we talk about the I in BIM is around information, and what we're really doing is enabling that information to be at the center of the design process with InfraWorks and Civil 3D, both using that in terms of the information model. And I'm not sure if Dave has covered, talked much about the cloud and some of our cloud work sharing, but another initiative is really how we move that data to the center of the process and then enable it through the cloud. So it's really a key initiative. So it's kind of a long answer, but InfraWorks is critical to that process in terms of coming up with an authoring environment for coming up with concepts. Secondly, Civil 3D, absolutely not going away, critical in that process for detailed production level work. And then you're going to see us make those products more and more, let's say, seamless. In fact, I think Dave was going to show, or did show, how from within Civil 3D you can leverage InfraWorks directly from within Civil 3D. So you'll see more and more of that type of work as we bring that workflow together. So,
perfect, Dan. Thanks. Yeah, you broached the whole cloud strategy there, and Peter's queued up to give a quick little demonstration. But can you elaborate just a little bit more on what the kind of the vision on that is?
Yeah. So even just in generally within Autodesk, I mean, if you've been following, there's really a push to start leveraging the cloud in ways that enable you to be more profitable and have work practices that make your company successful. So we're looking at that, and one of the key things is how we can enable collaborative workflows, whether it's within your own organization or across boundaries. So maybe you have multiple organizations working on a project. How do you work in a way that where you can leverage the cloud, leverage these tools in a collaborative way, but also this enables us to have the data at the center of the process. So now you're working on a coordinated aspect of that project. All your users have coordinated aspects to that information, and it also facilitates things that I talked about earlier in terms of collaborating between Civil 3D and InfraWorks, between Revit and Civil 3D. So that's kind of just a brief introduction to it in there. In terms of our strategies, as you'll see in the coming year, that's one of our key strategies for the coming year.
And I think what's good here, Peter, maybe if I can get you to do a quick review of some of the things that we're doing on the cloud front. This is a bit more tuned towards Civil 3D, but it obviously aligns towards what we do elsewhere. So let me give you.
Okay. All right, so this is part of it. So this is BIM 360 docs that I have open. And if you're familiar with Autodesk Drive or A360 Drive, you're familiar with the idea of taking files and putting them into a location on your machine that then is mirrored up to the cloud. And what we're looking at doing is extending that so that once the files are up here in the cloud, somebody can go in and without Civil 3D or InfraWorks, they can open up any of the drawings in a viewer. And this can be web, it can be mobile. And you can see the surface. And if you pick on the surface, you go into the properties, you can see all the properties of the surface right up in this web interface. And this is a 2D view. We can go to a 3D view. Let's go to this view. So we're seeing a full 3D view of the model in the web viewer. So this interface lets you share drawings within a team, within a dispersed team. So if you have a team in the East Coast and a team on the West Coast and they're both working on the same project, they're both able to use the same data through the cloud interface. So your drawings would be mirrored to your local machines. You'd be accessing on your local drive mirrored to the cloud. So there's no NAS devices, there's no network devices that you need to replicate, say, a Vault server. It's all done pretty much seamlessly through the BIM 360 Docs interface in the cloud. Okay?
So that looks awesome, Peter. I mean, this is Dan again. So just a couple comments on that. So that's looking at some of the capability that's in place now. But as we look a little further ahead, InfraWorks, plugging into that environment, one common way of managing your users. So if you're managing a project, whether I'm managing Revit users or Civil 3D users or InfraWorks users, one common way of managing users. All that data shared in the same location under BIM 360, whether it's your Revit information or Civil 3D or InfraWorks, and then of course managing permissions and controls to it, so you have the right access to that right information. And then lastly, I mean, Peter went through that quickly, but I don't have to be a CAD expert to start accessing these files. So he had full access to all of that civil information. Didn't need to know Civil 3D. Had information, all the information about the model, whether it's the properties of the model or all the characteristics of it, all in a browser environment. So.
And you could do review and markup.
Yep. For doing review and markup, you can on top of that. So again, it's a glimpse of it, but key to our strategy for the coming year.
Perfect. Excellent. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Dan. So I'm going to dig into a few more of the questions here. You're welcome to hang around, or...
So I got a question for you, Dave.
Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez.
So have you been thinking about the Super Bowl at all?
Oh, the Super Bowl, that's coming up. That's coming up, isn't it? Poor Eric Chappelle. I mean, that's why we've agreed to do this webcast. Eric's a big Pittsburgh fan, and I felt so sad for the guy. I was like, we've got to do something.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Just want to make sure you're still with us, Eric.
Yeah, I'm here.
But yeah,
that shot hurts, but you know.
Yeah, you know, I mean, we're not too focused on it, but you know, since you bring it up, Dan.
All right.
Yeah, bring it up. Yeah. I just watch it for the commercials myself. Anyway, so
I won't derail your show anymore, Dave.
All right, thanks. So a couple of other themes of questions that I wanted to talk about here. One that came up with a few different folks is actually two focus areas. One of them was rail. We had a few questions about, you know, what are our plans regarding delivery of our rail tools and really expanding out our rail solution just in general. So for those who aren't familiar, we've had a rail extension to Civil 3D that we've been delivering for the past few years, actually for more than the last few years, for a number of years. And we've made improvements to that over, I think, 2 releases ago to expand that functionality. We've also been working on content, rail-specific sub-assemblies, both single and double track sub-assemblies, and those are now included in the product. We're also working on some other improvements that are very, they're particularly beneficial and necessary for rail customers. So, you know, alignment regression and some other things. So we're working on improvements in that area. The point I want to make is we are looking at what else we do. You know, some of the thoughts that we have are, you know, do we build out a rail workspace so that, you know, as a rail user, I've got, you know, the appropriate Civil 3D commands kind of available to me directly versus a, you know, a cross section of you know, a rail user having to kind of hunt and peck through the Civil 3D user interface. So that's one of the things we're looking at, and as I said, we're also looking at you know, specific capabilities that would benefit these users. What I would request of folks is feel free to add questions, comments right into the interface here. If you're a rail expert, you're somebody that would be interested and available in connecting with us in some of our validation and research efforts. We'd love your feedback. If you're using Civil 3D on rail projects today, we'd love to see the things that work and the things that could be improved. So let us know through the interface. And then again,
We're going to talk about some of the other ways that you guys can be involved, and that will be another area. That leads us to kind of the next thing, which is being more involved. And I'm going to have to kind of pass headsets back to folks here. I don't know whose is whose. Okay, so let's start with Peter. So from an involvement standpoint, there's kind of two areas that I would kind of note. Right. First of all, there's the scope definition. Right. What are the things that we're going to actually invest in either building or improving? So that's sort of, think of that as that's the front of the bus, right? That's driving the bus. You know, what are those things we're actually going to invest in? We look at a number of different inputs. You know, we have ongoing interaction with a broad range of customers, so very large and then, you know, very small customers to get feedback on what's most important, what's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. We have validation efforts or events. We have meetings at things like Autodesk University or on site. We have weekly webcasts. We have forums that we track, both non-disclosure and public. So there's a number of different inputs, but one that was introduced a year and a half ago and is now available is Autodesk Ideas. That one works. Okay, so what I wanted Peter to do is just give folks kind of an introduction to Autodesk Ideas, what that is all about, how we use it, and maybe some best practices, Peter, I think, on how it makes it more actionable to us. Okay?
Great, thanks, Dave. All right, so perfect. So this is Autodesk Ideas. It's a community forum up on the web. Hang on a second. That you can go and add ideas to, review ideas that are already up there. Am I broadcasting? Okay. And then vote on ideas. So a couple of things. One, we're looking at this on a fairly regular basis. We've got actually a spreadsheet that harvests all the data, and we're able to rank them based on the votes. So the votes are really important. The more votes that an idea gets, the higher up on the list that it goes. We are starting to cull the ideas. So we've got some ideas that have been in there for a year or so that have one vote, and we're starting to kind of park them on the forum. It's not to say that they're not great ideas. It's just that they haven't gotten a lot of votes. If you think it's a good idea, resubmit it. Once the new ideas tend to get more votes. A couple of things when you submit an idea, try to tell us what the problem is and not necessarily tell us what the solution is. What we like to do is we like to group together numbers of different problems and come up with a solution that might hit multiple ideas. The other thing is only put one idea in a forum post. There are some forum posts that'll have 10 ideas in them. It's great, but it's hard to make any one of them actionable. So one idea per post. The other thing that we do is we tend to group up the ideas so that when we see duplicate ideas, we can actually merge the ideas together. All the comments go together and all the votes go together as well. And then we're able to look at the hot ideas as well as the top voted ideas. So that's the hot and then the top voted ideas. Okay.
Awesome, Peter. Thank you. So the other thing is setting expectations. So we have there's a relatively long lead as we build out our scope. Right. In other words, it's we don't necessarily pivot instantly when an idea is posted. So there's a number of things that have been up there that are clearly they've bubbled to the top, and they are things that we've not yet introduced, but they are things that we're aware of and we're looking at how we build them into our roadmap. So I'm going to just share my screen real quick. because one of the things that is, change it to me. Okay, so one of the things that I don't know if it's Peter still 1 or 2 is the table.
Number 1.
Yeah, number 1, right? So using the AutoCAD table, and this also aligns with a question that somebody along here asked about being able to make a table that combines my points relative to an alignment. So basically a Kogo point alignment offset table. This is an example of something that we're looking at here, where you were able to specify an alignment, and maybe I'll specify a point group, which is kind of out of here. Pick all my points. Right. So here are all of those points and their relative chainage, so station and offset. If I have multiple alignments in my drawing or in the style for my table, I'd be able to have my multiple alignment, station offset values included here. But in this case, when I place the table, you'll see what you get is an AutoCAD table, right? And this is all, again, it's all dynamic. If I do anything that's going to change, in this case, the change of the alignment or move one of the Kogo points, right? You'll see it's going to update. In this case, I think we're moving the Tim point, right? So Tim's being moved kind of on and off the alignment, or to the left and right alignment. But again, to the point, right? This is something where it made more sense now to, rather than using the Civil 3D legacy table object, far more appropriate for us to build this, using straight AutoCAD table. We are looking at again, purpose-built tools. So in this case, we have a specific requirement, like Peter said. I need to be able to make a table that has my Kogo points in my that are relative to an alignment. Okay, that's the purpose. That's the specific requirement. And then we're also looking at things such as Idea Station, which says, well, the most important thing is we need to be able to start using leveraging that AutoCAD table, or the capabilities that are like the AutoCAD table. So this is sort of a kind of a both of them. Can you repeat that, Tim? That okay. So the next thing is, let's say we have these kind of priorities. We define scope. The next part of it, and I think this will probably be the last area that we can focus into, is how do we go about really validating those ideas? How do we go about making sure that what we build is actually what you needed? And remember, when we're dealing with customers from all around the world, so what you need in New Hampshire may be very different than what's needed in Germany or Japan or Iowa, right? There's different requirements based upon industry and geographic region. So we try to get a broad view of people's requirements as best as possible. So we've got a couple of programs, and Tim is actually going to speak to that right now. And again, our offer to you is that, the more we have people involved with these programs, the better we can get feedback, which ultimately ensures that we give you a better solution to the problem that you've identified. So I'll turn it over to Tim, and we'll.
Great. Thanks, Dave. How's that? Awesome. Okay, great. Thanks. So anyway, so the main method that we use as the product team to interact with users and just kind of validate what it is that we are researching and working on is this whole idea of, it's called the Civil 3D Futures Portal. And essentially what this is that it gives us an opportunity to just talk about things under non-disclosure, things that we are either actively researching or the product team is actually working on and trying to get in code and everything. And this gives us a chance to kind of post ideas up here and say, hey, we're thinking about working on this particular tool, this particular workflow. Here's a proposal for it. What do you think? And get your feedback on it before we get it into the product and that sort of thing. And so this tool actually is a great place for, we use it for a number of different things. We use it for that ongoing validation work that we're doing, but we also use it for, like, I'll scroll down a little bit here and you'll see that we actually have betas running up here. Like currently we're in like a beta program for both Civil 3D and also for Autodesk vehicle tracking. So if you're interested in beta testing some of our stuff that we actually have in the pipe, then this is a great place to do that and give us feedback and make sure that we've got things right. And we also host weekly webinars, Dave and Peter and I and some other members of the product team as well, where we every week just kind of roll out some ideas of stuff that we're working on and get some feedback and make sure that we're solving the problems in the right way and everything, the way that makes the most sense to the majority of our users. So if you're interested in participating in any of those kind of programs, up here, just please send us an email at civil3d.futures@autodesk.com and let us know that you'd like to participate, and we'll sign you right up, and we'd love to get your feedback.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Excellent. So I think we are down to the wire here. Those were, I mean, there's a number of questions. Like I said, we were optimistic in the list that we even said we target, and we didn't get very far through that. So there's obviously a lot going on. We try to hit on some of the near-term things and some of the longer-term things. We also try to talk about those things, those ways that you can get further involved. Again, Tim's offer, that civil3dfutures@autodesk.com. The more the better. This is one of those types of things too. You can spend as little or as much time as you want in these sessions, right? This is not something that should be burdensome to you. We know that everybody's very, very busy. So, beyond physically testing product on your machine, we have where you can run it in a virtual environment, so you can, without having to install anything, you can actually test a new feature. Webcasts are I think they're a really good way not only for you to provide feedback, but also to hear how other people are dealing with current problems and how they're solving problems. So anyway, so I think hopefully we gave you kind of a good cross-section of things. That was our intention. If this is something that we think we need to do in the not-too-distant future, glad to do that. We'll work with Eric on that. So with that, I'd like to say thanks to Peter, to Tim, to Dan, who has left the room, and also to Elliot for, again, for providing feedback and also for doing your best to keep up with questions. It was really good to spend an hour with you, and we look forward to spending more time in the future. Thank you all.
Just wanted to say one more thing and remind everyone of our upcoming webcast on February 15th with Jeff Bartles. It's going to be talking about creating custom InfraWorks 360 content, and I just wanted to thank everyone one more time for coming. And Dave, Tim, Elliot, Peter, thank you for being willing to put yourselves out there today and give our folks some insight as to what's going on there in Manchester and all around Autodesk. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day and enjoy the Super Bowl. See ya.